We were looking at this question in order to see what's the difference between the original Phillips curve and the modified Phillips curve. In particular, we wanted to see what does it mean when the text says that in the case of original Phillips curve, lower unemployment results in higher inflation, and in the case of modified Phillips curve, lower unemployment results in increasing inflation. On the first part, we started off with the case where we had the original Phillips curve and we initially had unemployment at the natural rate and inflation at pi bar, and then the government decides and then the authorities decided they wanted to reduce unemployment, and we saw that resulted in a higher level of inflation where the inflation rate went up from pi bar to pi bar plus 4% forever. So it was now at a higher new level, but it wasn't constantly increasing each year. Like it stayed at pi bar plus 4% as long as unemployment was kept at the lower level. So now let's see what happens if inflation expectations de-anchor and we have a case of the modified Phillips curve, right? Part C says now suppose that in year t plus 6, people form the expectations using theta is equal to 1 forever. So now we know, so this is part C. So now we know we're given k pi et, like in the text we're told, is equal to 1 minus theta pi bar plus theta pi t minus 1. So now if theta is equal to 1, because the inflation expectations de-anchor and theta increases from 0 to 1, which is how the original Phillips curve broke, pi a t is equal to pi t minus 1, theta is equal to 1. Now this is what we call a de-anchored expectations, right? When pi t is equal to pi, but that's anchored inflation expectation. Inflation expectations are constant, right? So not constant. So de-anchored expectation is not constant. De-anchored expectations not constant, but depend on last year's inflation. So last year's inflation. So in this case, expected inflation is given as pi t minus 1. When theta was 0, we saw it was pi bar, right? It was anchored inflation expectations. And Phillips curve equation is now given to us as pi t is equal to pi t minus 1. So here we initially had pi bar, which was a constant, right? Plus 0.1 minus 2 ut. And this is the modified Phillips curve, which is the trade-off between change, inflation, and unemployment. This is what we need to understand what that means. So this is the modified PC. Now the question says the UT is still kept. Now the question says now UT is still kept at 3%, right? Is still kept at 3%. Below UN is 4% forever. Below, sorry, UN is equal to 5% forever, right? So basically, again, just like in the first part we did, we are saying so UT is basically constant, right? So UT is constant, right? So UT is constant, right? It's always going to be 3%, right? UT is 3%, UT plus 1, like we saw, UT plus 2, UT plus 3, UT plus 4, UT plus 5, UT plus 6, 7, so on, right? So PC becomes, so the equation of the PC is going to be pi t is equal to pi t minus 1 plus 0.1 minus 2. Here I can just plug in 3%. Why can we do that? Because UT is kept at 3% forever. Not as UT, not only is UT plus 6 3%, but UT plus 7, UT plus 8, and so on, right? So UT kept at 3%. So UT kept at 3% below UN forever, right? So then this turns out over here pi t, now if I simplify this, is equal to pi t minus 1 plus 4%. If we recall when basically when theta was 0, so we got pi t equal to pi bar plus 4% in the first part. So in that case we said regardless, so even if I like forward this every period and seek it from pi t plus 1, pi t plus 2, pi t plus 3 is on the first part, it was always pi bar plus 4%. It was constant at this new high level when you lowered unemployment. But now note, in this case, note, inflation rate increases by 4% every year, right? In year T, it's 4% more than the previous. If I forward it by one period, it will be that in T plus 1, it's 4% then in year T, right? So here inflation rate increases by, so over there it was constant in the first part at pi bar plus 4%. Here it's increasing by 4% every year. If we in 4% every year, if we maintain UT at 3%, below UN is 5%, right? So if we're lowering unemployment, so every year inflation will be 4% higher than the previous year, right? So if we just delete all of this up and see. So basically, so we know in pi t plus 6 this change happens, right? Pi t plus 6, so pi t, because we saw, right now we just saw that pi t is equal to pi t minus 1 plus 4%, right? This is what we saw. So this means that if I forward this, now instead of t, I use t plus 6 here, right? You forward it like 6 period, then you'll see this is pi t plus 5 plus 4%, right? And then you'll see this is, so then if I forward this by one more period, so this is pi t plus 7, pi t plus 6 plus 4%. So we can see in year t plus 6, inflation is 4% higher than the previous year. In year t plus 7, it's 4 percentage points higher than the previous year t plus 6, right? Similarly, pi t plus 8 is pi t plus 7 plus 4%, right? So we can actually find these values too. So we know that pi t plus 5 from part A is just pi bar plus 4%. And then it's 4% higher. So this is pi bar plus 8%. So this is part A, right? And over here, we know that pi t plus 6 we just found is pi bar plus 8%. And if it's 4 percentage points higher, so this is going to be pi bar plus 12%. So this is obviously pi bar plus 12% plus 4%. So this is going to be pi bar plus 16%, right? So over here, the interpretation is going to be given theta is 1, right? So you have a modified Phillips curve because theta is equal to 0. We have original Phillips curve, modified PC. So there's the Phillips curve. We saw the trade-off was between that when you lowered unemployment, you had a high level of inflation, but it wasn't increasing every year. Now trade-off between lowering unemployment permanently. So here, obviously, the goal is that you wanted to keep UT below UN forever, right? Lowering unemployment permanently below UN and permanently accelerating inflation, right? Here, you don't have permanently higher inflation. In that case, when you try to lower unemployment from 5 to 3%, you kept it at lower level forever. Then in that case, inflation went up to a higher level and stayed at that high level forever. It wasn't increasing. But here, when you try to lower it, we can see every year it's increasing by 4 percentage points. So it's permanently accelerating inflation, increasing inflation. Permanently accelerating inflation, right? So the trade-off is between lowering unemployment permanently below UN and permanently accelerating inflation, right? So how are we lowering it? So U decreased from UN is equal to 5% to 3% forever. And permanently accelerating inflation is not just higher. So inflation is not just higher than pi bar. So it's not just higher now, right? It's not just above pi bar, but it's increasing. But inflation is increasing um, by 4%, 4 percentage points every year, right? But it's increasing by 4 percentage points every year. So in summary, now if we summarize all of this up, so now let's just summarize what we have learned from this about the original and the modified Phillips. So let's do a quick summary now. In summary, so we started with UT is equal to UN, which was 5%. So we started with UT is equal to UN. And okay, no, wait. Let me just write it down. So so basically we said we started with unemployment equal to the natural rate 5%. So this is what we started with. And then in JT we did the change and inflation equal to 5 bar. This is what we started. Then we said that in year T, UT decreases from UN is 5% to 3%, right? So you started off with the case for unemployment is at the natural rate, 5% inflation was pi bar. Then in year T, UT decrease from UN is 5% to 3%. Let's look at what we have learned so far. So we learned that as a result of this in year T, in the first part we learned inflation went up to pi bar plus 4%. In pi T plus 1, it went up to pi bar plus 4%. And so on till pi T plus 5. So here also it went up by, it was pi bar plus 4%, right? And here the key was that this pi bar plus 4% is a constant, right? So this was a constant here, right? So this was a constant and this was a constant, right? So the key here was when theta is equal to 0, we know expected inflation is just equal to this constant value pi bar, so we anchored inflation expectations. So lowering unemployment, so this was what the original Phillips curve says, right? Lowering unemployment resulted in higher inflation, right? So you have higher inflation, you don't have increasing inflation, right? Inflation went up from pi bar to pi bar plus 4%, but stayed at that higher level. So not increasing inflation, new inflation rate stays same for each year, right? So we have higher inflation here. Okay, so we don't have a lot of space here. So okay, high inflation, not increasing inflation, right? Inflation rate stays the same for each year. But now let's look at what happened in pi t plus 6 when theta increased in value. So in pi t plus 6, we saw the inflation was now 4% higher than the previous year, right? And then we saw it was actually pi bar plus 8%. And similarly in pi t plus 7, we saw the inflation was a 4 percentage points higher than in year 6, right? So it was pi bar plus 12%. Similarly, we saw in year t plus 8, it was 4% because once theta increases in value, so the inflation rate increases by 4 percentage points every year. So in this case, it's pi bar plus 16%. So we saw when theta is 1, right? Given theta is equal to 1, pi t is equal to pi t minus 1 and theta is 1, pi t is pi t minus 1 during unemployment resulted in increasing inflation. So this is the difference between the original Phillips curve and the modified Phillips curve. Unemployment below UN resulted in increasing inflation. Right, so here inflation is increasing by 4% every year, right? We have this 4% every year, right? So every year inflation increases by 4 percentage points. So every year inflation increases by 4 percentage points, right? This is what the difference is. So in the case of original Phillips curve, we saw when unemployment goes, when you reduce unemployment, you have high inflation, right? You have a high level of inflation, but then it stays at that higher level, right? The new inflation rate is the same for each year. It does not keep on increasing every year. But in the case of modified Phillips curve, where you had anchored inflation expectations, so in that case, you're lowering unemployment below UN means you have increasing inflation, right? Every year, inflation kept on increasing. It wasn't constant. At a new high level, every year it was increasing by 4 percentage points. So this is what it means when the text says, in the case of original Phillips curve, lower unemployment means higher inflation. And in the case of modified Phillips curve, lower unemployment means increasing inflation because inflation is not just higher, but now it's increasing every single year. Like one year it was pi bar plus 8, then pi bar plus 12, pi bar plus 16, and so on.